can't get the crowds, and she can't get that excitement.
I know it doesn't.
But she is going to get an interview coming up, it seems.
Well, okay, we'll go to that, which is another major headline this morning.
Well, it actually plays into what we just saw.
The Los Angeles Times reports this morning that the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server is about to enter a new phase. The paper cites two sources familiar with the probe who say that federal prosecutors have begun to step up formal interviews in the coming weeks with longtime Clinton aides. Meanwhile, a lengthy Sunday cover story in the Washington Post describes how the Clinton email scandal took root, writing in part that Clinton aides and senior officials, quote, paid insufficient attention to laws and regulations governing the handling of classified material and the preservation of government records, interviews. They also neglected to repeated warnings about the security of her BlackBerry, while Clinton and her closest aides took obvious security risks in using the basement server. That was the one in her house in Chappaqua, right? Early on, there were concerns about Clinton using a BlackBerry in the so-called Mahogany Row area of the State Department because of previous espionage attempts. According to the Post, in March of 2009, one top State Department official told Clinton, quote, any unclassified BlackBerry is highly vulnerable in any setting to remotely and covertly monitoring conversations, retrieving emails, and exploiting calendars. 9 days later, Clinton told the official that she had read his memo and gets it. According to an email sent by a senior diplomatic security official. But according to the paper, Clinton kept using her private BlackBerry and the basement server. Vice News notes that more than 1,800 emails were withheld or heavily redacted under exemptions to the Freedom of Information Act, including 22 that were not released because they were deemed top secret and would cause, quote, exceptionally grave damage to national security if disclosed.
So, Ron Fournier, that's the line here. You know, Hillary Clinton and her team have been saying all along, we didn't send or receive any classified information. The State Department has said that there are 1,800 emails, but 22 emails were deemed top secret and would cause, quote, exceptionally grave damage to national security if disclosed. I've been hearing some commentators say this is much ado about nothing and that the FBI is just checking the systems out for their own exercise. They're moving now into a phase where they're granting immunity. They're bringing everybody in, interviewing, including one news report says the secretary herself. This seems to be expanding far beyond a procedural investigation.
Well, it has been beyond a procedural investigation practically from the beginning. This has been a
Can I ask why that hasn't been reported? Because you ask reporters behind the scenes, they'll tell you they know there are 150 or so FBI investigators on the scene. That never makes it into these stories.
Well, because we let ourselves get tied up in the knots with the spin from both sides. It's true that we don't have a target in this investigation. We don't have a legal target in this investigation. Any implication, any suggestion that Hillary Clinton has been or is a target would be incorrect. But that doesn't mean that this isn't a criminal investigation. The FBI is looking into the possibility that crimes were violated. I think, look, what we have here is what is baked in the cake, Joe, is that we know Hillary Clinton has not been honest about this. And it's shown in the polls that most Americans think they can't trust her. We know that she showed a disregard for Freedom of Information Act, a total disregard for Freedom of Information Act, for the whole idea of legislative oversight and for the whole idea of the value of a historical record. That's baked in the cake. Now, I think what's going to happen here, if these stories are correct, she's likely to be interviewed. That's going to bring all that back up to the surface. But the big question is, the only thing that really changes the game is if we have any criminal charges.
Well,
I don't know that's
exactly
going to happen.
And the things that you talked about,
that may not happen.
Intel officials have been saying to me and have been angry for some time, not so much about FOIA, they've been talking about the reckless disregard for the classified information, and that there's so many classified documents that both came and went. And you know, when they talk about it wasn't marked on there, that's just
there's two things:
a distinction without a difference.
Right. So politically, that plays into this whole question that we really can't trust her. That she's been saying things like, "Well, they weren't marked classified," when we all know and voters understand that really doesn't matter. Legally, though, there's a big bar that you have to get over to prosecute anybody for these crimes, much less somebody who's running for president. And as critical as I've been of Hillary Clinton, and I am very critical of Hillary Clinton, I do understand that when somebody's running for president, there is a higher bar you have to get over, because we can't have a system in which we're constantly charging people who are running for president.
Actually, the bar
that's
is
two
a
different issues.
reckless use of classified information, and I will tell you, if an FBI agent took a classified document out and went and just left it in a coffee shop and then went back, you know, their career would be over. I can tell you also that if I had gone to an intel briefing and they had told me what happened, you know, in whatever program, and then I went back to my office and I sent an email as a congressman out about the information that I learned at that intel briefing, they would be in my office in 3 hours and would say, Congressman, you need to get an attorney because that's illegal.
And I'll tell you that.
And the scale of this is so remarkable. I don't know how James Comey, I do not know how James Comey doesn't do something definitive. Election year or not.
That's where, look, I'm not, you're an attorney, I'm not. Politically, there's severe questions about her judgment that voters really have to look into. Legally, I can't sit here in a set and say that she has definitely violated the law, and I do know there is a harder
either.
Okay, I'm sorry. There is a higher bar you have to get over before you prosecute somebody who's running for president. That's just a fact.
Where, in what statute is that?
Section B.
Oh, thank you. There are a lot of people with that would say we're all equal under the law.
Well, don't you? But this is the thing, though. Don't I mean there is? I mean it's not codified, right? But we all recognize, and this is sort of the frustration for Clinton critics, which is that exactly what you're talking about, which is that had she been some sort of underling at the State Department, certainly there would have been different standards applied to her, as opposed to her being the Secretary of State.
If she were an underling, she would already have charges against her.
And
no
granted,
doubt
all that's granted. Now the Clinton people turn around and say, listen, there's been reports that showed that Colin Powell did almost identically the same thing, which is a forwarding of information that was later deemed classified on his private email account, and there was not an uproar over him. Now, the magnitude of what Colin Powell did is probably different.
It is completely different. There weren't regulations that they set in place in 2009.
Exactly, it came before the regulations.
Yeah, but if the standard is that you're leaving classified information around and that it could be, you know, taken by
which is why they put the regulations in place, because they'd like to always.
There is no.
But this is why Democrats are privately still really nervous, and part of why I think, you know, Bernie Sanders' campaign, to a certain extent, I mean, nobody wants to say out loud, oh, hey, now we have somebody who is strong enough to step up into those shoes as our nominee if, in fact, this scandal blows up in a way that, you know, as you were saying, with criminal charges. Nobody wants to say that out loud, but there are a lot of Democrats who are still really nervous.
Well, this invites Bernie to stay in.
Well, exactly. And Mark Halperin, I was going to ask you, I mean, from what I've heard, that is, while they don't mention it publicly, that is also a calculation that a lot of Sanders supporters, but also a lot of Democratic fundraisers are concerned about. What happens as this investigation continues to grow? 175 FBI agents, interviews coming up, and more damning details coming out by the week. What are you hearing behind the scenes from the Democratic leadership?
Well, look, you just don't know. The Clinton aides who were named in the Los Angeles Times story to be interviewed, these are people who know a lot about Hillary Clinton, know a lot about her email practices, and you just don't know what happens when they get called in to be interviewed. And if you look at the calendar and you look at how long it's going to be where Bernie Sanders will be in this race through June in California, there's the prospect of, for him, the alignment of political victories and nervousness within the Democratic Party of nominating someone who would be potentially under criminal investigation, potentially. And so it is obvious for him, if he wants to be the Democratic nominee, to be as strong as possible. I think the days are over when people think that if she does run into legal trouble that someone could take this nomination away from Bernie Sanders. And that argument only grows stronger the more delegates he wins, if it comes to the point where there is more nervousness, because there is clearly nervousness now. Democrats got over, they were so distracted by her fight with Bernie Sanders, they got over focusing and obsessing on the investigation. But these two stories will bring that back to the fore. And when this interview takes place, she will be under pressure to explain, because whether she broke the law or not, whether a Democratic Justice Department indicts her or not, or makes her a target or not, it is clear that she was cavalier about this, and people are uncomfortable with what she did.
All right, a lot of other things to cover this morning.